Welcome to the second week lecture, second week's first lecture on detailed theories of international trade. We are stretching the theories in detail. Now, this is the second week. Myself, Dr. Pratap C. Mohanty, as a faculty member of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Roorkee. We will carry forward the context which we started in the last class, discussed in the last week, especially on trade theories, the introduction to trade theories. We discussed so many examples on it, especially classical to modern, then the theories in between, the evolution of theories over the time, and the context of Portugal and England. Also the context of India and China. So, we will carry forward further to introduce mercantilism in detail. So, before introducing mercantilism as part of the NPTEL program on strategic trade and protectionism, theories and empirics, mercantilism is the foundation stone behind understanding international trade theories. Now, once again to to discuss the introduction of trade theories, let us discuss in the context of India, and India must focus on areas it has comparative advantage rather than fear of rise of China or fear rise of China. So, should we fear the rise of China? The absolute answer, the obvious answer for India is no, quote and unquote no. Because of the fact that China, though in the international context the largest economy now and 5 times larger than India's economy, and manufacturing sector wise it is 10 times higher than India, but these factors alone explain China's success in exports, and that too especially for manufacturing exports. Now, much of Chinese economic success is due to rapid growth of its exports, especially in manufacturing, which I have said. Now, it is very ironic because of the divergence in their respective exports performance, and has come despite the fact that while India was a founding member of WTO in 1995, China became a member only in 2001. So, India has a stronger bonding with the WTO discussions and rounds, where China does not have. So, India has better rapport in various contexts. So, deepening further the Chinese story of India's concern. Now, world's largest reserves of iron ore, bauxite, manganese etc. are with India, not with China. Similarly, India has comparative advantage in the world market in many other commodities such as food items, agriculture raw materials, fuels, ores, metals and precious stones. So, China has only one, that is manufacturing. And while we try to discuss this context, these is other products, we also simultaneously keep in our mind emerging rising growth stories, growth theories which was propagated by Jagdish Bhagwati and its international competitiveness, especially for the case of terms of trade. And further, to the context of Chinese and India's products and India's worry on Chinese rise, for an obvious answer for India not to be worried because of the fact that our products are highly complementary. So, one product derives the demand for another product. So, there are high chances our products to be exported to international market sustainably, whereas China does not have if you analyze Chinese story in detail. So, what do you think? And what do you think, China will take all the advantages over the time? I do not think so. What are your responses? What other aspects China has made competitive advantage. Okay. Packaging, which I have said a bit, designing. Anyway, all these things are actually linked to the context of manufacturing. But why do you forget the fact that India has huge advantage in service sector and software as well, software industries as well. So, though we are little back to or stepping or little behind to those economies, but our progress is quite significant, magnificent. So, therefore, we should not worry about it. So, what kind of readings we must follow since we are going to the deeper aspects of international trade. In the last week, I have given a complete or a gamut of understanding of international trade and how trade must be connected to each other. You can see my background picture which was set deliberately to understand how each countries are actually connected with their shapes. So, one country to another country is attached, another country is attached in different manner, first country to another country. So, look at the background and try to understand further. Now, I did not give the readings in the last because of the fact that you should not be confining your understanding just based on a textbook. These are given, these contexts were actually jolted down from various sources, from internet, from books, from various debates, from YouTube. So, those sources I collated and presented before you. Now, here since we are digging further towards the understanding of theory and strategic trade through classical and modern theories, now onwards you must start reading some of the standard text. So, I used to refer this in my various lectures. This book is quite good for international economics and these theories for better understanding by Dominic Salvatore. Published by Wiley India, I think recently it has been changed to Pearson, you have to check with the latest one. Now, similarly Carbo, Robert Carbo, published by Cengage Learning, and Krugman Offfield is another very good book. If you want to test with certain new mathematical equations, maths and examples through explanation through examples, and this book is one of the best. And this book where Krugman is very famous for advanced trade theory, especially for in the context of intra-industry trade and in the context of differentiated products. So, this book is very useful. Trade is not possible, trade information is not possible if you do not check the latest information from World Trade Organization. So, this is which I have already said, these are the organizations started due to the situation, the experts, the propagates of different experts of international trade suggested the development of this type of topmost organization in the world. So, World Trade Organization captures various data sets for your better understanding. Similarly, Reserve Bank of India DGCIS, this should be read as not GDCIS, DGCIS. DGCIS and International Monetary Fund reports must have been also looked at. Whatever data I collected are from these sources only. Also, I added, I have already discussed economic survey, latest economic survey, (2018-19) should also be followed. DGFT, Director General of Foreign Trade, India Comtrade, or UN Comtrade also can be referred. For data analysis, RBI is one of the best source. In addition to that, we may also refer UN Comtrade, so things are actually written in those data sets are written in HS classification, harmonized standard code classification. Harmonized standard codes are made because suppose we are exporting a textile variety with certain name. So, that name may not be the same in another country. So, they may not even read. For example, if we are exporting our product of which is competing with ITC, especially Ramdev's Patanjali's product, they write the product name as Dankanti. So, Dankanti may not be read correctly by any importer from another country. We have to actually make a HS classification for comparison. While analyzing data, we must make the same code with same classification. Similarly, some of the entry point we make it in 2-digit level, 3-digit level, 4-digit level, but in other countries that may not be in 4-digit level, that may be in 3-digit level. So, we have to make a synchronization of it for a better understanding. In addition to that, I will also be referring many newspaper article through the wake of my lecture, and many other informations will be at us in due course of lectures. So, this is the complete map and structure of the presentation for this week, especially for this week. Till this part we are referring in this week. These are all theories of international trade. This map is for theories of international trade. This week we are covering mercantilism, absolute cost advantage, comparative cost advantage, a bit of hexarolin, but we are stretching it to the next week. Here we are explaining with various examples, various numeric examples, some calculations, estimations will be made for understanding the theory and strategies systematically. Now, let us jump into the section or the foundation of classical theory called mercantilism. So, mercantilism, how to start with it? So, we are supposed to know what is this, which period is started, who started, and what they suggest, and how they suggest, what are the context by which they suggested. So, what we found, a country's power actually depended mainly on wealth. It is their first suggestion, wealth, and strong navies or the movement were also propagated, and purchase of vital trade goods, especially precious metals are suggested, precious metals. Metals should be procured as their suggestions. And another point to note here is that mercantilism had no systematic or comprehensive or consistent treatise or explanation. There was no such defined leader in this regime who did not suggest a common method or theory. So, therefore, this theory did not exist for a long, and they did not claim as a base for international trade. Protectionism is often seen as a primary characteristic of mercantilism. We will explain all those things in successive slides. Primary mercantilism, I mean objective of the mercantilism is to concentrate or increase power of the nation state. So, they propose for restrictions and favor the nation state only. The states that followed a policy of mercantilism tended to see trade, colonialism, and conquest as the primary ways of increasing wealth. The term mercantilism was coined by Marquis de Mirabeau, who were actually French economist, and they are also called he is also called a Physiocrat. We will explain what are the contributions of Physiocrat. So, it is a system closely associated with the rise of nations and the concept of nationalism. Nationalism is overemphasized in this regime. Now, what are the time period we are referring to? 16th to 18th century, especially for Poland it is referred in the 17th century, and the countries which were following the mercantilist practices in this regime were France, Spain, England and Holland, these 4 countries. So, what are the other historical note to mercantilism? As I already said, nation state, believe in nationalism or nation state, and which is disfavoring free trade. Feudal institutions especially were weakened by the increasing use of money and a greater reliance on exchange within the economy. So, that was also observed during that period. The Protestant Reformation weakened also and consequently, the civil role of state was expanded because the state they believe majorly on nation state or nationalism. So, therefore, these two are actually negated. There was a rise of humanism, humanism, as I already said, the concern for well-being of humans in the short term. So, decline of feudalism was influenced by change in the technology majorly. I need not you may follow it from the slide, it is clearly given how much extent that has actually helped in the reduction of feudalism. Similarly, what other factors actually has undermined the extent of feudalism are actually explained here, especially rise of market, rise of technology, gunpowder, improvement navigation, exchange with other products, countries movements, etc., etc. So, what are the broad point then? So, they explain once again nation state or statecraft, promote national wealth and power, in short. Importance of trade surpluses, especially they are against to import, favor the trade surplus, especially for gold inflow, precious metal as I already said. So, that has led to a greater national wealth and power. Analogy to this understanding, as I already said. So, the discussion is between nations and households, how households are actually beneficial. They encourage domestic production, exports, therefore, they can able to export and discourage heavily for the imports. And economists is statecraft not analyzed clearly in their discussions. Similarly, they also talk about balance of trade surpluses, balance of trade specifically I am mentioning because services sector was not emerged by that time, and they also propose for zero sum game, maximizing productivity and output and procuring wealth I have already mentioned. Role of government in encouraging domestic manufacturing exports. So, link between money supply and prices are also discussed. Now, since I have said many things on as a background or the discussion of mercantilism, we have emphasized their key features. So, bullionism is one of the major aspect, how to procure more bullions, precious metals. So, there those contents are expressed in their currency, bullions, especially gold and silver it possesses. Spain is the richest country because of the gold and silver from its colonies in Latin America. Spain would be referred in the context of mercantilism. So, colonies are also discussed, feudalistic structure are actually weakened as I told you. So, colonies are important to be discussed because of it provides, and I mean the mercantilistic structure actually provides help in facilitating raw materials and are forbidden from purchasing manufactured goods unless they come from the mother country. I mean the source country or the domestic country must have been emphasized. So, the feudalistic structure by any form are actually undermined, weakened. Similarly, they are against the seas, they protected their seas once they protect, I mean this protected because of it will not allow others to enter to their country. Especially England, Sir Walter Raleigh actually behind these suggestions. In Spain, Pierre Raleigh, etc. So far as population is concerned, they discourage young people from entering the, gave tax breaks to families with over 10 children. So, who are the Physiocrats? Physiocrats are the economists during that time who are famous for their ideas. So, they are also considered a school of thought, and they give ideas to the government. The government during that period actually forms laws or actually emerged from the Physiocrats. Among great contributions of Physiocrats, they introduce the profession, the importance of building theories based on the models which were analyses were made by isolating one or more variables in the economy. Economy was majorly agriculture based, manufacturing did not take off by that time. So, they advocated capital accumulation as an essential part of economic growth. Similarly, they wanted the state government also to flourish. So, consequently what we actually observed during that period is with the fact that consequently the look at those things which could do both and focus on taxation and trade, but that should be purely confining to those nation state. So, what I have already said, it must be facilitating accumulation, capital accumulation, but again specific to their state. They argue for larger tax increase on landowners and lowering tax on farmers. So, other aspects are important. Let me carry forward in the next slide to explain it in detail. So, there are two basic criticism of them, especially for the Physiocrats, because of the fact that theories were not based on the facts of their time. They simply suggested that tax must be imposed on the bigger farmers at the cost of others, but actually there is no evidences clearly emphasizing. Their theories were basically normative. So, they considered only the farmers to have the capacity of producing a surplus above necessary cost. So, only those farmers are considered. So, these are repetitive, I am not emphasizing too much. So, two ways to increase a nation's wealth as suggested. One is through gold and precious metals like gold and silver. Another one is actually balance of trade, in which sold more goods than they bought. So, mercantilism explained that colonies existed for the benefit of the mother country. Sources of raw materials must be cheap. These are the things I have already said. Finished goods or shipped to the colony must be expensive. Profit goes to the, especially for the mercantilist based colonies. Then pass laws forbidding colonies from producing their own goods. So, basically mercantilism is equated with unfair or unbalanced trade. They only favor surpluses against deficits. So, in other theories you will find the trade theories largely try to explain balance of payment or balance of trade. Some other aspects, evidences were observed during that time. Europeans transported manufactured goods to the west coast of Africa through this route highlighted here. These are some of the evidences, these are the movements. Then other triangular flows are also observed. Traders then exchange these goods for captured Africans who were then sold in the Americans. So, basically they captured Africans and again sold them to the Americans. So, merchant then bought sugar, coffee, tobacco in the West Indies and sold them back to Europe to sell these products. So, there are triangular routes attached to it from Africa to US to then Latin America, then those receipts are actually taken to the European countries. So, what are the long term results? long term results or the trade routes over time. We emphasize old Silk route as against new Silk routes. Silk routes basically the routes they followed for trade. Now, you can see the old Silk route and the new Silk the Silk routes are also given in various forms. Java I think is important to be referred, Indian context should be referred so far as mercantilist discussions are dealt. So, the Atlantic and Pacific sea routes become the new focus for international trade. So, who benefited most from mercantilism? They are the monarchs, they are also the merchant capitalist, joint stock companies, though we are interpreting it, but during that time those are not there, stock companies are not there, but interpreted joint who have had or who had joint collaboration, government officials. So, theories of international trade is revisited once again through mercantilism as accumulation of capital or for their treasuries. So, nationalism is their utmost importance, trade imbalances are observed. I have already said these things. So, limitations are also important to discuss. Accumulation of wealth takes place at the cost of another trading partner, say win-lose game and a zero-sum game for global wealth. So, therefore, over the time this constrain their trade because others try to retaliate. So, supported those theories for the countries, especially for the short run, there was no vision for the long run. They overlook other resources such as natural resources or manpower, skill levels, capital, etc. So, they use colonial powers as a means of exploitation and development. So, they never opened up their economy for larger participation. So, therefore, their works are highly limited. So, who are the writers actually in the mercantilist? The Machiavelli from 1469 to 1527 period, Bodin from 1530 to 1596 period, and Serra, Antonius Serra 80 to 1650, they are referred as the writer who write the mercantilist propositions. Who are the mercantilist thinkers? Maybe to some extent referred as the Physiocrats. Josiah Child, Mandeville, Hume, Hornick and Thomas More. Thomas More is very famous as a topmost Physiocrats and thinker for the mercantilist group. So, largely as a summary for mercantilism, bullionism we have already discussed. Each nation must try to achieve economic self sufficiency. They must not depend on other country. So, agriculture was the focus. Manufacturing sector was not came off significantly. Sea power or sea routes are restricted to foreigners, and they impose internal taxes of all kind. Colonies provide captive markets for manufactured goods and sources of raw materials. Trade is a zero sum game, we have already defined. Large population was needed to provide domestic labor force to people of the colonies. Luxury items should be avoided because of the fact that they can procure more wealth with the country. So, they took money out of the economy unnecessarily, the luxury items especially. State action was needed to regulate and enforce those economic policies they propagated, and those economic policies also restricted monopoly practices. Colonies would provide captive markets for manufactured goods and sources of raw materials. Now, manufactured goods you can say to colonies, then cheap labor to as a raw materials to the mother country. So, mother country kept on progressing through various channels. Though manufacturing goods were not discussed at large, but can be interpreted like this. To conclude the mercantilism theory in detail, foreign trade as a source of surplus. So, no analysis of production, there are lots of limitations also, it is completely a short term phenomena, short term discussion, there was no vision for sustainability of their practice. They added feudal imposed on commerce, created government sanctioned monopolies because they controlled, though controlled free market one, because they restricted heavily in different segments. Points of criticism and departure of our later physiocrats and classical economists, with emphasis largely upon laissez-faire and laissez-passer. Here we are emphasizing on make the economy more free. So that was actually suggested by later or their successors, especially Adam Smith period. So Adam Smith is actually referred. So we are referring to the late 18th century, Adam Smith from University of Glasgow, Scotland, where the chair actually in the time. So transfer to chair of philosophy also in another year. We will carry forward the Adam Smith discussion, classical economist discussion for the context of absolute cost advantage, absolute cost advantage theory in detail. These will be discussed in very carefully, systematically. We are introducing this only because of the fact that what others after mercantilism. And in the next class we will emphasize very systematically on the base of classical economist called Adam Smith as the father of economists. I hope it is convincingly understood to you one time. Thank you so much.